So I've been on the lookout for quite some time now to try and find a cast on crit build that can do most of the game and not really break the bank. Most cast on crit builds end up costing 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 exalt just to even be able to function properly, and I really didn't want to do that. And I had a viewer suggest to me, why don't you try Blade Blast? Well, that's what we did, and it turns out you can actually do pretty much all of the content of the game on a relatively cheap budget. This is the cast on crit Blade Blast Bladefall Assassin. Hey guys, Big Ducks here, and welcome back to the channel. Now, as I said before, I have been looking for a cast on crit build for some time. Now this one is pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. It mainly only requires like some basic gems, 2 poet's pens, some halfway decent rares, and a couple of jewels. That's pretty much all that you need to really get this build going. However, this is a cast on crit build, so it does mean that it scales basically to the moon depending on how much currency that you force into it. Now, I was a bit hesitant at first, but a viewer had told me that, well, you can get pretty much all of the content done with this build just because Blade Blast is so insanely powerful as a base spell, you really don't need to invest that much into it. My character, for example, that you'll see in most of these clips only has a few exalts invested into it, and that is mainly the 6-link Kintsugi, which you don't need. The rest of the gear that I personally have bought is really not that expensive, maybe 1 to 2 exalts. Now, I want to give you a clear warning here. I have not spent that much money on this build. This is not what the build is capable of. This build can do so much more than what you can see here if you do decide to spend some money on it, but I only spent a couple exalts and we still got some pretty good results. Now remember guys, if you enjoy my content, make sure to like this video so that more people can see it. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this. And if you're interested in getting a sneak peek on the next build video that I'm going to be making, the best place to figure that out is over on my Twitch page at twitch.tv/bigducks. Best way to get a sneak peek, so make sure that you follow over there. Now without further ado, let's take a look at some of the highlights of our leveling and gearing experience of this character, and then we'll get into the guide. I've said before, I kind of feel like they made Elder a little bit too easy, and before he fucking smacks the shit out of me. But they've kind of made the Elder fight, particularly just Elder, kind of too much of a face roll fight now. Because the phase in between with the minions actually used to be pretty tough. Yeah, Elder is kind of just mostly face roll at the moment. Can I survive this? Cool. This phase used to be way harder, but I feel like nowadays with how much builds have creeped up on power, that it doesn't really have any danger anymore. Like you could spend like a couple exalts on a build at most and be able to just completely smack this fight with most things. Like clear speed is so much better nowadays that this phase is just not really dangerous. Yeah, the build's going pretty solid. It's very safe for the most part. Like the only thing that really kills you, like most of these like big leech builds, is basically just getting a one shot. But the thing about it is, I feel most of the time is that with Kintsugi and Wind Dancer, that combination is just very, very strong, I feel. Alright, not bad. Does Elder even have good drops? The Watcher's Eye can be good. Oh, is this the good fragment? It is the good fragment. Nice. Let us try some Shaper. Who's got the big suck now, lady? Your suck is not strong enough for me. I require more. Is your Poison BV build pretty much min-max, or is there more you can do like Headhunter or maybe Clusters? But sure, there's more that you can do, but the end game version of it is relatively like all that would be worthwhile. All right, so we did quite a bit of damage there, yeah? But I only come up close. No, it seems to be the same. Okay, so it's not, all right. I kind of hated Clusters for a while there because they just pissed me off, but yeah. I gotta try it. We gotta try to stand in the beam. Oh yeah, buddy. Easy clap. Right in the beam. I even did it without the curse on him. That always looks so weird. Yeah, see, I can legit just stand in this and not actually take almost any damage. I don't even really need to worry about the ground dots either. I can kind of just stand in them. Yeah, I can kind of just stand in the ground dots too. I'm just gonna stand in the cold dot, it's fine, who cares? Same fragment every time, dude. All right, boys, you know what time it is, right? Someone already said it earlier, but you know what time it is. It's time to get serious. Awakener 8 serious. Alrighty, gamers. All right, let's see if we can block it with blades. All right, you gonna be able to get your beam through this? Dude, it never works, man. It just never works. I can never save them. I was only able to save them one time. And it was because Cirrus missed. I wonder if we're gonna get a bad dice roll. If we get a bad dice roll in the last phase, it's gonna be a little rough. Yeah, honestly, the damage is not bad, right? Like, the damage is pretty solid. Like, just sitting there and being able to, like, attack him, the damage is pretty solid. It's this phase that really determines whether or not Cirrus is hard. The problem is that in this phase, it's basically like a coin flip whether or not you get a Cirrus who constantly does the mazes or not. If you get no mazes, this fight is significantly easier. Oh, I'm lagging a little bit. Again? Really? Now? Why is it always during this fucking phase that I start lagging? I'm lagging right now. Yeah, I'm fucking lagging, dude. That's twice now that I've started lagging in that fucking phase, dude. Look at my fucking ping. Look at this. 130 out of nowhere. That's twice in a row that when I've gotten to Cirrus, my ping just fucking shoots up randomly. Can we, like, not do this, GGG? Can you not, like, actually try to assassinate me when I'm trying to kill Cirrus? Like, look at this. Look at how bad it's lagging. How the fuck am I supposed to do this? Dude. Come on, dude. Look at this. This is so miserable, dude. Oh, this is so bad. Look at this, dude. I can barely play. I don't know where he is. Okay, cool. Yep. Nice. Look at how terrible this lag is, dude. It's not my computer, guys. Like, I promise you it is not my computer. Like, I'm not, the thing about it is this isn't lag of my computer. This is server lag. Look at the latency. This is server lag, right? Like, do you see this? This is server lag. This is not my computer. The way that it works is when you're on lockstep, if the server lags, your game freezes. That's how it goes. That's how lockstep works. I logged out of the game. You should be good now. Oof. All right, well, we lost like 3 or 4 portals to it just being a laggy fucking mess. So that's cool. I don't know where he's at. There he is, cool. What the fuck am I even supposed to do? This is such a bad location, dude. His timing is like massively desynced, and it's so weird. Oh yeah, make me run through all the fucking ground shit. God, his timing is so massively desynced. Aren't you dead, dude? Come on, man. You're literally dead. You're literally dead, dude. What a nightmare of a fight, dude. I don't even know how to explain to you how much bullshit that was. That lag was miserable. We got the worst possible version of the fight. We had the worst lag I've ever had on that fight in my entire life. We also, like, desynced his abilities to the point where he wasn't using them like he normally does somehow because of how we died or something like that. And we still beat it in like 3 or 4 portals. Build's actually good, boys. Hey guys, so remember, if you want to jump to any specific section of the video, there are timestamps in the description that jumps to each and every little bit of the video, so make sure to jump to whichever part that you need, or if you're looking for some specific area, there's always those timestamps there for you. Now, this character is the Blade Blast Bladefall Assassin. Yep, CoC anime villain. Now, as I said in the intro to this video, I have honestly not spent a ton of currency besides on the 6-link Kintsugi, and the only reason that I bought the 6-link Kintsugi is because I kind of felt like I'd be able to reuse this quite a few times this league, so I've kind of been reusing it. The rest of the gear is honestly not that expensive. This one, the +1 maximum power charge Star Conja's one I bought, it was like 10C. This ring was not that expensive. I just got a very basic ring with strength and the life gain for each enemy hit by your spells. This is one of the ways that we managed to get so much life recovery. And then the poet's pens were a few chaos. The rest of the gear gear I've pulled from other characters. I've literally been using the same gear for like 4 or 5 characters now. I do highly suggest that you invest in a simple set of just good gear that you can use across your different characters. You really don't need to change up pieces that often. You don't need the Cinder Swallow, it is good, but you don't need it. And last but not least, I do want to give you the notion that this build, while the gear for it is not that insanely expensive, does scale insanely well with gems. And what I mean by that is that this is a cast on crit Bladefall Blade Blast build. And the idea is that the way that Bladefall works is that when it is triggered, it leaves 50% fewer lingering blades. However, you can see it leaves a lingering blade in the ground for each volley, 5 volleys, and leaves 50% fewer blades. Now, if we take a look here on one volley that I'm running, if I can get it to pop, you'll see that we get 6 blades here, right? Now, you would think that that's kind of weird, right? It says, well, it leaves 5 volleys, 1 blade for each, and fewer left if you're not casting it yourself, so what's happening? The idea of what's happening is we have Spell Cascade on here. So the idea here is that this is tripling, essentially, the amount of blades that we're able to get. Now, what I would think is that 5 reduced by half would give us 2, since it would most likely round down, and this is giving us 2 additional areas of Bladefall. So that means, in essence, we are getting 6 blades per Bladefall. We have a Spell Cascade in both of our Bladefall procs, so that means that, in essence, we're getting, whenever we're critting, about 12 blades every cycle. Now, the idea here is that you could essentially get an additional 8 blades on top of that, almost doubling your damage if you did Awakened Spell Cascade. Because what Awakened Spell Cascade does is it does in front, behind, left, and right. So now that I've kind of given you an idea of how this build works and what happens, we simply just hold right click, it casts a bunch of blades, those blades are then detonated by Blade Blast, which is popped by our Poet's Pen. Let's take a look at an actual map so you can kind of get an idea of how this is played. We are going to be running a tier 16 Sunken City with 3 of these scarabs here. We're also going to be running 4 sextants. These are going to be increased monster density sextants. You're going to see 8 additional packs, 8 additional packs, 8 additional packs, as well as increased magic pack size. This all is on Awakener 8. Now, I've really been trying to figure out a cast on crit build that I could play that wasn't going to cost a million currency. It wasn't going to cost like 40, 50 exalt. It wasn't going to break the bank. And this is kind of the one that we fell on. And the reason being is that it can utilize Poet's Pens to do most of the heavy lifting. As you can see here, you'll probably notice that most of the time our health bar is full. And the reason being is that we are using a Vitality Watcher's Eye. I pulled it from another one of my builds. It was like 60-70C, I think, when I originally bought it. I've been using that on pretty much any build that attacks quickly. And then we also do have a ring that causes us to gain about 15 life per enemy hit by our spells. So that means that any Blade Falls, any Blade Blasts are all giving us 15 life per enemy hit. So we pretty much stay topped off at any given time. The one major downside to this build is that it does take about a quarter of a second to get the damage ramped when you first initially start attacking. That's not a huge downside, but it is still a little bit of a downside. So I just want to make you fully aware that that is a thing. Beyond that, this build is very, very smooth. You don't have to worry about very much. You can kind of face tank a lot of bosses. If you do go with the Wind Dancer Kintsugi combo, you are very, very tanky for the most part. Even with only 5,500 life, essentially on bosses, when you're not getting hit that often, your life pool is closer to 8k because you're taking 40% less damage. Now, for the most part, you're literally just right-clicking with Barrage, and you're just letting the Cast on Crit and the Poet's Pens do the work for you. We do use Flame Dash as our movement skill. We have 4 auras going on. We've got Vitality, that's only for the Watcher's Eye, Flesh and Stone, War Banner, and Pride. We're basically just trying to make enemies take more physical damage. Now keep in mind, there is a poison variant of this that has been floating around for quite some time, but that's not what this video is about. This is specifically just straight physical damage. Other than that, we do use Poacher's Mark again. Pretty much any build that I've been playing that hits an enemy quite frequently with attacks, I've kind of just been using Poacher's Mark for it. The other reason that I'm using Poacher's Mark is that it does benefit this build quite heavily, and let's talk about that real quick. So Poacher's Mark in particular, it gives us a bunch of mana and a bunch of life when enemies are hit by our attacks. Now keep in mind it does say attacks, so the idea is it's only our barrage. However, we hit with barrage pretty often. We're hitting probably, it is, let's see, 5 projectiles. It's about 4 times a second, so I mean we're hitting about 20-ish times per second, probably less than that accounting for accuracy. But that's still a ton of extra mana and a ton of extra life that we're getting through this. Now on top of this, it also does give our enemies negative physical damage reduction, as well as some added physical damage to hits against cursed enemies. and we hit quite often. So the idea is that Poacher's Mark is giving us a ton of damage, and it's giving us some easy mana sustain as well as just a bunch of damage, you know? Easy mana sustain, easy life sustain. We don't really use very much mana, but any mana that we do use, say if you didn't have as many of these minus mana cost things, would be able to be taken care of by that. Now, beyond that, we do have an Enduring Cry just to kind of give you a little bit of healing on bosses if you do need it. Like, say you're running around and you can't hit a boss and you need a little bit of healing. That's what Enduring Cry is for. The mapping is quite smooth. I haven't had any issues with it, really. The only thing that this build ever dies to is one-shots, and that's pretty much the downfall of dodge builds in general. However, since kind of the advent of the Wind Dancer Kintsugi combo being so popular now, the one-shots really aren't that often. I maybe see them one every 10 to 20 maps, roughly. If I get like a really, really dangerous map or something, you kind of have problems. When it comes to actually bossing, this build is kind of interesting because for the most part, you can kind of just stand in bosses' faces as long as they aren't one-shotting you. Now, we do a ton of healing, and our boss damage is okay. It's not actually as bad as I was expecting it to be. I was expecting our clear to be pretty decent, but of course this boss is just going to kind of troll us. But we'll see if we can actually get some damage going. Now, you can see when the damage actually begins to ramp up, it goes quite fast. And you'll also notice that when the boss is hitting us with those abilities, we're pretty much healing back to full instantly. Now, this is pretty consistent through all bosses in the game. Any boss that doesn't one-shot you is pretty simple to just mow down and not have to worry about. You can kind of see that whenever an enemy hits us, a boss hits us, doesn't really matter who it is, right back up to full health almost instantly. Let's see if we can tank this. See, there you go. I was taking chaos damage to the face there, and we have negative 26 chaos resist. She hit me like 2 or 3 times, and it really didn't even tickle us very much because we just healed straight back to full constantly. That's pretty much it when it comes to mapping. It's a very, very solid mapper, very solid boss killer. It's relatively safe most of the time. You could get more life than this if you really wanted to, however, I feel like you don't need it, but let's talk a little bit more about the build in general. So there is one thing that I want to address, and that is that there is a way to scale this build quite heavily that I'm really not going to get too deep into just because I never really found it relevant. I never really found that I had to worry too much about it, and this is one of the main things that kind of turned me off from Cast on Crit and Poet's Pen's builds, is the idea of breakpoints when it comes to attack speed and when it comes to cooldown reduction and it comes to internal cooldowns of both Poet's Pen and Cast on Crit. I honestly have been completely ignoring them so far and have not noticed too big of a deal with it. I haven't had to struggle too much on any content. I've cleared most of the game. I think the only boss we weren't able to kill was Uber Elder, and honestly, I could have killed Uber Elder pretty easy with just a little bit more investment of gear. I just really didn't have the damage that I would have liked for that fight. The idea is that both Poet's Pen and Cast on Crit have a 150 millisecond internal cooldown. You can get cooldown reduction on like your boots, you can get cooldown reduction on your belt, and this lowers that cooldown a little bit. And the idea is that as long as you are attacking slower than once every 150 milliseconds, or whatever your cooldown reduction is, you won't be clipping your attack, right? Alternatively, you need to be attacking in equal intervals underneath that. So the idea is that if you could somehow get your attack speed to like 75 milliseconds, then you would still be okay. You'd probably want to go with like 76 or 77 so that you don't have to worry about any lag or anything. I haven't worried about it at all. I've just kind of been scaling my gear as best as I can, trying to get more damage and not worrying about this whole attack speed proc thing or anything like that, and it's been working perfectly fine. If you would like to do that, there's more information about it in the Path of Building. Make sure that you check that out. That's all that I really want to talk about that little thing there. Now moving on to the next thing, and that is actually how this build scales damage and how it performs. So the idea behind this build is that it is a Poet's Pen build. We are scaling both Blade Blast damage and the amount of blades left on the ground by Bladefall. Now, Blade Blast is a very, very powerful ability. It does a ton of base damage. It naturally unnerves enemies, which makes them take an additional 10% damage from spells. And on top of that, it does scale very well from levels. So the idea behind Poet's Pen is that we are using Poet's Pen's plus level to active skill gems, as well as the fact that it procs a whole bunch of spells constantly to scale a ton of Blade Blasts. And these are meant to just overlap as much as we can. You will notice that in some of my gems that they aren't going to line up perfectly with what you see in the Path of Building. I suggest suggest you follow the information that I have in the path of building because it is the most up-to-date information. This build can get kind of complicated. I've explained it all in the path of building. The other thing to think about is the actual cast on crit. Now the cast on crit, I personally use barrage as well as faster attacks to proc our cast on crit. This means that we get a pretty respectable attack speed. We hit enough that we don't have to worry about not hitting or critting enough to proc our cast on crit every 150 milliseconds. You can use frenzy up until the point where you get the timeless jewel, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I would say that once you get all of that together, the barrage is significantly better. We use this to proc another Bladefall, so we've got a Bladefall here and a Bladefall here, just to get us a ton of blades going, a ton of damage going, and a ton of overlap. It helps us with clear and single target and everything else. And remember, you want to scale the AoE of the Blade Blasts, and you want to scale as much less AoE as you can on the Bladefall. Smaller area of the Bladefall means that the blades are closer together. Larger AoE of the Blade Blast means that they overlap better. That's pretty much all you really need to know about how the build itself functions. It's a very typical cast on crit assassin build. We just go a ton of crit. We use grand spectrums to increase our crit a bit. All that we're really worrying about here is life, power charges, and crit. That is all that we care about on this tree, and some dodge. We do use a Vitality Watcher's Eye, like I said before. I pulled this from another character. It's very good to buy. I think it's a safe investment across the league. And then I will talk about this Timeless Jewel that gives us Inner Conviction. Now, the idea behind this Inner Conviction is that we scale a bunch of power charges. I think we have 7 or 8 right now. I'm pretty sure we have 8 due to the helmet as well as the unstable infusion. We have 8 power charges. So the idea here is this gives us all of the damage that frenzy charges would give us, but it doesn't actually give us the attack speed. Now keep in mind, you can actually get frenzy charges if you do minimum frenzy charges. You can get that through a ring enchant, or you can get it through the passive point here, which is Disciple of the Slaughter. Minimum frenzy charges do still work. Any other way to gain frenzy charges does not work with this. This is Militant Faith under Dominus. You can get whatever else you like here. I just grabbed whatever I possibly could to keep this cheap. I think it was like 1015C at the time. Other than that, we just use Grand Spectrums, and there are Cluster Jewels that you can use for this build. Those are explained in the path of building. It's mainly like crit and physical overwhelm. This build does a lot of very small physical hits, which can be defended quite well by armor. So having a good amount of physical damage overwhelm is pretty good, and you can get some of that through Cluster Jewels, as well as like the kinetic impacts here, and as well as the Poacher's Mark. It does give us quite a bit extra damage having that physical overwhelm. That's pretty much it about the skill tree. As I said, I go more in depth in the path of building, so make sure to take a look there. Beyond that, we can talk a little bit about leveling. This is not a build that I would suggest that you ever league start with. I do not suggest that you league start with it. It is not going to be a very nice build to attempt to league start with. This is the kind of build that you play second in a league, or like halfway into a league. This is the kind of build that you choose later on once you have some leveling gear. This build pretty much does require Poet's Pen early on to feel good. If you want to have the experience of this build, Poet's Pens are pretty much required, and they're not super expensive. They never really are. I do suggest that you get some decent ones with some good attack speed on them. However, you're probably not going to be able to get a hold of 2, let alone 1 Poet's Pen in the first day of the league, as well as all the rest of this gear. The idea is, play this second, grab all the gear that you need. I have a list of all the gear in the notes of the path of building. You need like some Poet's Pens. I would probably grab like some basic leveling gear. I kind of keep a stash of leveling gear just on hand at any given time, and use whatever pieces I can, like a Tabula, as well as Loctonial Caresses, Gold Rim, Wanderlusts. Thief's Torment is really, really good for leveling this build, because every single time that you hit with any attack, you're pretty much just going to go back to full life and full mana. Don't have to worry about mana regen, don't have to worry about life, don't have to worry about anything. A couple Quicksilver Flasks to get you moving through the axe fast, and that's pretty much it. You don't have to worry too much about leveling as long as you have all of those things. That's pretty much all that you need to know. We're going to jump into the path of building now, because that is where I'm going to give you most of the information about this build. There's not a lot much more to say about the character. I've already gone way more in depth than I normally do in most of my videos, just because I want you guys to get an idea for what this character is about before you get into it. It is a little bit of an investment, but I did enjoy the character quite a bit, and if you wanted to spend like say 10-20 exalt on this character, you would have an absolute monstrous character that could kill everything in the game in just a couple of seconds, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything, as you'd be like pretty much unkillable. Without further ado, let's get into the path of building. So now that we're over here in the path of building, remember that if you do have issues with being unable to load path of building, you can join my Discord, and if you paste the Pastebin link in any of the proper channels, like the bot channel or the PoE questions channel, you will actually get access to most of the information in here. You don't have to worry too much about not having a computer or an ability to open path of building. You can do that through the Discord. So join the Discord, the link is down below. However, if you do have access to Path of Building, which I suggest that you at least learn, I want you to know that I do spend quite a bit of time on these Path of Buildings, and I try to get them as in-depth as I possibly can. I add to them over time as I learn new things. These Path of Buildings do have full leveling trees, so you can see this is the non-cluster full tree. We do have the full tree with clusters, where we add in some extra cluster jewels, so you can get an idea about these. So you notice that I do have leveling trees. You can see that we start out here early, going through attack speed, physical damage, life, damage, crit. We're getting some more physical and crit here, grabbing this physical damage here, as well as this overwhelm. Physical damage reduction is very important for this build, as we do lots of small physical hits. Grab some life, and we grab some dodge here, as well as move down towards this way. And also, you can see that our first ascendancy point is going to be Mistwalker. Mistwalker is very good for leveling, as it gives you a ton of defenses, ton of offenses, as well as a bunch of movement speed. Next leveling tree, we're going to be moving down to some life, as well as Wind Dancer. We're also going to be heading over to the left and start stretching across the tree, grabbing some life and some just stat points here. We're also going to be grabbing Opportunistic, more move speed. As we move into the skill points, you'll see we fill out quite a bit more. We're getting our power charges as well as our power charge scaling, moving over all the way to the left side of the tree, getting some life here, and moving over towards this last power charge. Not much on the right side of the tree except grabbing this power charge here. And then also you'll see that we are moving towards Unstable Infusion as we're beginning to scale our power charges. And then the last leveling tree, you'll see that we fill out our Inner Conviction Jewel. We get our last power charges, fill in some jewel slots, and get our last Ascendancy, which is Deadly Infusion, just to scale our damage a little bit more. So that's the idea behind the leveling trees. I also do have skills over here, including leveling skills. I've got all of the different skills that you have available separated into separate sections so that it is easier to read and easier to digest. Remember, I have leveling skills here, as I said before. These are the skills that you would use before getting Poet's Pen. You can use either EK or Purifying Flame. I've got each of the Poet's Pens here, including what to use with your wand attack, your movement abilities, auras, and then later on, I do have both of the standard versions that I use as well as the more expensive versions in here. So you can see that I've got the main link, which is just going to be Barrage, Cast on Crit, all of the normal stuff, and then if you go over here into the Awakened version, you'll get ones with different variants as well as some Awakened stuff here. Keep in mind, these are expensive. I'm just adding them in so that you know where to go and what to use your currency on. Same thing with the Poet's Pen spells as well as the utility. Now, in the item section, this is my gear that I currently use to clear most of the content in the game. Keep in mind, there is a budget set of gear as well as an expensive set of gear. The budget set of gear is going to be pretty easy to get a hold of. It's nothing special. This is probably like maybe an exalt worth of gear, roughly. It depends on what really you're going for. It's just some basic rares, a corrupted 6-link chest piece, as well as some just random rares with life, resists, and a shaper ring that has the life gain on a hit with spells. Shouldn't be too expensive if you go for a very basic one. And just some random pieces of gear. Shouldn't be too expensive. My gear is a little bit of a step up. I did get a 6-link Kintsugi as well as the power charge, maximum power charge Sarkanjas, a couple good pieces of gear. And then there is also the expensive set of gear. This is highly super unobtainable items that you really should not be able to get. This is for giving you an idea of what to look for. So for example, on these gloves, you'll see that this is spell damage, mana gained on hit, culling strike, attack speed, life gloves. Insanely unobtainable gloves. You should really just be trying to get gloves with things like this on it. You should be looking for like gloves with culling strike if you can manage them. You should be looking for boots that have cooldown reduction rate on them, as well as tailwind if you can manage them. Get any pieces of that you can. As well as shaper rings that give you the life gained on for each enemy hit by your spells, and resists, and a Stygian vise with cooldown reduction, all that kind of good stuff, right? This is expensive gear, don't expect to be able to get it, but it gives you goals to work towards. Other than that, the configuration should be set up pretty properly. This is always on Awakener level 8. Keep in mind the DPS over here isn't super accurate. There's not really going to be a great way for me to get super accurate DPS out of POB. You could see that this says 1.8 million DPS, but I was doing quite a bit more than 1.8 million DPS in my actual map that you saw earlier, as well as on some of the bosses. It's really hard to get the accurate damage. I talk about it in the notes here. Speaking of the notes, there is a ton of information in here. If you have a question or need any information, this is the place that you should go. This is the place that you should check out. I spent a ton of time on this, making sure that all the good and proper information is in here. So please, give it a look. So remember guys, if you have further questions, please join my Discord. The link is down in the description. It is the best way to get in contact with either myself, any of my mods, or some other helpful people in the community. I'm not available all the time, but you can feel free to join, get help with any of my builds, come and hang out with me and the boys, as well as get updates as when I go live on stream. All kinds of cool stuff. If you have further questions, that's the place to go. Now, my final thoughts on the build is that it's really, really powerful. I've wanted to play a cast on crit build for some time, but I haven't really been able to find one that I think would be able to do enough with as little amount of gear as I was feeling comfortable spending. And this one kind of did that for me. It made it so I didn't have to spend like 20 exalts to feel good. I didn't have to worry about a whole bunch of crazy gear that everyone was fighting over. Yeah, it performed really well. We did most of the bosses in the game, cleared really nicely. I didn't have a ton of fun in heists particularly, but I mean, that is what it is. You can do whatever you want with the build. Really solid, really fun, really tanky, really survivable. Abuses the dodge combo of Wind Dancer and Kintsugi. Just really good. Remember guys, if you enjoy my content, like this video. Make sure more people can see it. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this. And stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.